Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. Welcome. So I just finished 8 hours basically, like going over like all the PoE2 stuff, looking at all the reveals, listening to the developers talk, going back over the stuff, looking at everything, and honestly, the point 5 patch looks pretty darn good. I'm gonna go ahead and just say it now at the beginning. The PoE 2.5 patch looks really good. Really good, actually. They didn't add a new sword or a new weapon, but they did add a bunch of Calguran skills. In fact, one of the developers was quoted as saying that there's like over 2 dozen Calguran skills and um, support gems, which, judging from the way that they function and how they don't require a weapon and can be basically used on any ability or any character, seems like they are effectively a new weapon. Some people might be upset that there wasn't a new weapon added, but I feel like with the Calguran skills specifically and how they function, they added a new weapon effectively. If you take a look at some of the Calguran skills, they didn't show us all of them, but they did show some of them, and they're absolutely crazy. Like this one right here, the Triscalon Cascade, is absolutely nuts. It basically takes any spell and empowers it to do a huge AoE effect, casting essentially like multiple of that ability in a Triscalon symbol. Basically, this symbol right here, which is like a tri-pointed like do jank here, and it literally covers like the entire screen. It's absolutely insane. I think that one's going to be really popular. They showed it with Comet, they showed it with Nova, they showed it with a couple abilities, and it just looked absolutely dirty. They've also got the Mark of Repulsion, which looks really interesting for a werewolf build. I was actually thinking about this with the werewolf. They can actually apply the marks by attacking, and then the other attack, which actually consumes the marks. So you could easily apply the mark and consume the marks repeatedly, causing the explosions to happen constantly with the Mark of Repulsion, which could be really interesting. They also showed another one, which was the am I missing it on here? It was like a shield, which was really cool. It could shield all your allies. They also showed a couple of the support gems. This one, the one that adds physical damage equal to your runic ward, which sounds kind of insane. And then this one looks really good for stunning enemies. Supported skills trigger a runic shockwave on a heavy stun. So you can get basically a bunch of runic shockwaves going off for your big stun builds. Looking at you, warrior. Warrior tends to have a lot of stunning effects and like heavy stuns going off. In general, like I just really thought that these Calguran skills kind of got undersold, and that if they had actually fully shown them off, I feel like the general negative sentiment that there wasn't a new weapon or a new class might have gone the wayside when they realized that the Calguran skills seem to be like weapon multipliers, basically, in that they offer ways that you can augment existing abilities, which creates very interesting secondary options for those things. So there's going to be a tons of builds probably that come out of the Calguran skills, which is going to be really interesting. Um, they did do a lot of new player. I don't know exactly what you would call what they did. New player, like what's the word? Like augmentation, like softening, like entry, so they don't bounce off the game as hard. You know what I mean? Like when you have a new player comes into the game and they tend to like experience all the mechanics. Sometimes the mechanics aren't well explained and they tend to bounce off the product. Right. Well, they're kind of trying to like soften things up a little bit so that the players don't bounce off so much and that they and enjoy themselves. And they did this in a number of ways. According to what they said, they did, like a lot of changes to like the campaign by basically having some just general ways that you can tell what's going on without just like not knowing. Like if you walked into a room and there was like an invisible spider in the top right hand corner of the wall and you didn't know he was there, like, how were you supposed to know that he's there? There should be some signs or something. Like maybe there's a web or something's going on. They kind of like added signs of what was going on in the zones to make it more apparent to the players that something was actually going on, which is a good thing. It's like overall a good thing. And some of the examples they showed was like When you completed your first ritual, it showed like an evil ritual like thing moving toward where you're supposed to go for the ritual quest. Or like for the first boss, there's actually like footprints in the ground that kind of lead toward where the first boss is, so that you clearly tell there's like some sort of evil monster like nearby. You know, like you're like, oh, what are these? Like big evil footprints. Let me see where these go. I think overall, I think it should help new players get into the game better. But even more than that, they also did a lot of changes to the end game, which also kind of helped players get into the end game easier. They added quests essentially for all of the end game stuff, so that it can actually kind of explain how the mechanics work for the end game instead of just like tossing you into the deep end of the pool and watching you drown. It looks really promising. A lot of the really interesting stuff is that they did something that I had suggested like multiple seasons ago, which is I felt like the end game just lacked any kind of structure. And one of the things that I had suggested a long time ago was that they handcraft at least the beginning of the end game before it gets into the infinite, right? Like actually put some handcrafted zones, like like a breach zone or an abyss zone or something like that. Or there was no abyss at that particular time period, but the cool thing is that they've done that. In the pictures that they showed, which I could pull up, but I'm lazy. The the new endgame areas like actually have real crafted endgame zones. Like there's actually a place for the abyss, and you look over there, and it actually looks like the abyss. And you find like a delirium area, and there's fog on the map, and it actually looks like it belongs to the delirium. And so when you're looking in the distance, you actually see points of interest that are going to, like interest you, and you go in those directions. There's quest lines that you can do that actually push you in those directions to help you understand how the mechanics work and get you basically your first baby boss kill before you start going into the deeper stuff. I think overall, the changes that they've made to both the campaign and the end game for new players is definitely going to help a lot of newer players really like not bounce off the game so hard. And in fact, I think the end game changes are so good from what I've seen that I really wish they had been in the game when I first started, because I bounced off the end game myself when I first played it because I just really didn't enjoy it. The changes that they made to the end game are so vast that I can't really like explain them all. I mean, one of the things in Diablo 2 Resurrected that I think a lot of people know about is Terra Zones. And Terra Zones essentially make any zone into a viable farming place. Even Bloodmoor can become a viable farming place if it's terrorized, right? Well, a lot of the end game involved doing like generic, bland map that didn't have any real effect to it. And essentially, if you were to equate it to something, it would be a non terrorized zone. And the silly thing about this is that like if you're playing Diablo 2, like you don't really do non-terrorized zones once you get to that point, because the terrorized zones are just better. They drop more gear, the higher level monsters, they have better EXP, and so forth and so on, right? Well, like one of the things that I noticed about their changes, to kind of like sum it up in a very poor way, is that there's not a lot of like bland non-terrorized zones anymore. Like it seems like they've really done a good job making it so that there's a reason for you to go somewhere, and when you get there, there's actually a good reason for you to actually go and play those maps and have fun. They added a castle and kind of like rebalanced the end game atlas, so the atlas tree got completely redone. And you use basically the castle to go into this tree. The castle apparently has 300 points, is what they said, and you can basically cap out the entire tree. The tree looks absolutely crazy. They showed us like the barest nothing of the tree. It looks good, but I really need to like dive into it to see the full breadth of it. It looks like you can really customize the Atlas now way better than you ever could before. They said that you had enough points to completely max out the tree, but that there were a whole bunch of like individual options that were going to be multi-choice. So having a multi-choice option is going to make it so that it's much more difficult to just simply go like, oh, well, there's no choice and I just max out the tree and that's it. But I mean, honestly, there was like sometimes 3 or 4 choices for like almost every single one of the things. And like with like 300 points, I mean, I don't know exactly how many of them had multiple choices, but it seemed like a lot. It was mainly the larger nodes. So even if you assume that only 100 of those had multiple choices, multiply that by 3 again, and you're talking about like 600 total possible choices It seems nuts. There's some really fun stuff in there, like the ability to make bosses get shrines and the ability to force like the Asmeri spirits to do specific things. It definitely seemed like it was something that's going to take a while for me to really dive into and understand. Um, but the way that they have it is that basically the more you explore the castle, the more points you get. And they didn't. They said it wasn't 1 point per zone. It was there were some zones that were like 2 points and 3 points. So it's anywhere between like 100 to probably like 150 zones in the castle to completely cap out your Atlas tree. And there's like a pinnacle boss there, and there's a bunch of other stuff. All of the maps in the castle, by the way, so it's kind of important to say this, is that the maps in the castle are all unique in their effectiveness. So they have unique effects, all unique effects that you won't find anywhere else. They basically said that you probably wouldn't find these unique effects anywhere else in the game. So it's just something unique that you can do in the castle that's not going to be there, all the time. They did, however, say that like there would be, and they showed it. There would be a way to skip essentially the castle, which essentially, what they showed was is there's like a specific path that you go to complete the quest, and when you do that, you could choose like certain zones in the thing to just completely wipe them out and then get the points for them without having to do the zones. Although they did say that if you do this way, you wouldn't be able to experience the unique map effects that are only present in the castle. Although some of the unique map effects could roll randomly in the infinite world, which is interesting. Moving on to some of the other stuff. They added a bunch of interesting things. So Breach has a crafting tree. It's the only it's an actual tree, not a like skill tree. It's like a legitimate actual living tree that you like feed stuff. That's because it's gross, and then it poops out items when you feed it, and then you can like beef up the tree in specific ways with another skill tree, so a separate skill tree on the tree, which basically allows you to choose what stats that you can get on those items. It's literally a crafting tree with a skill tree that allows you to customize the gear that you can craft. It has special unique bases in it and all sorts of other things. It looks like it's going to be absolutely crazy this season because you can basically min-max what you can craft and then feed it items and then pump out pieces of equipment with the stats that you're looking for. Which of course it still rolls randomly in some ways, but it sounds to me like you'll be able to pump out at least like a halfway decent item just by forcing it to do what you want. They did say you only have like 15 points in the skill tree to like customize the item though, so you have to be very careful about what you're choosing. Um, there is over 100 new runes. They talked about that. They showed some of them. It wasn't really a whole lot of them, but they did show a handful. They did seem really neat, some of the runes. I'm trying to see if I have a screenshot of some of them, but it looks like I didn't grab a screenshot of the runes. I did grab a screenshot of the effective one of the runes, though, which was really interesting. This was the Breath of Aldlar, which basically puts all of the damage into cold damage. So it converts essentially any damage that's on the weapon, fire, lightning, or ice. I don't know if it works for chaos, but into cold damage, which is really cool. So you can see it's 306 to 406 cold damage, which is massive. Over 100 new runes. I mean, of what I saw, all of them looked really interesting. I didn't see any bad ones, but they only showed like a handful. They did specifically state that Delirium would be useful. Delirium would be able to craft on jewels now, which is a whole thing, including timeless jewels. There's a special one that works for the timeless ones. But basically, it looked like essentially you could just craft your own jewel kind of a thing. Each one of the different delirium emotions, I think it's called emotions, would add like a different effect onto the jewels. So we have some jewel crafting going on. They also added a bunch of new bases. These are some of the new bases that they added. Some interesting ones like Max All Res, Physical Damage Ring, Maximum Life Ring, Chaos Damage Ring, Maximum Mana Ring, and one that has this item gains bonuses from socketed items as though it was gloves, which is a ring. I didn't know rings could have sockets. Um, there's a lot of crazy stuff that they've added, including like some crafting belts that have lightning damage on them. Um, this one's nutty, and it has to do with Ritual. Is that Ritual apparently can like pull forward bosses now, and you can have, according to what they said, you can have up to like 6 to 7. I can't remember if it was 6 or 7 bosses. They did say that there was like a +1 boss modifier that you could get, and I think there was like something else. But that's the, as you can see clearly, that one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 bosses in a ritual area all together at the same time. Basically, what happens is you go in and you kill the boss at the end, who is actually in the ritual, and then when you go to the next zone, you get another ritual, and it includes that boss in the ritual. And so then another boss from the new zone comes into the ritual in with the first boss, and apparently this can go up to like 6 zones, is what they said. And if I remember correctly, they said you could get 1 extra through a modifier, which basically means that you could potentially have 7 bosses trying to murder you all at the same time, which just sounds absolutely dirty. A lot of the changes that they made just sound crazy. The league mechanic for this season is basically around runes. But on top of the fact that it is around runes, it is also kind of loosely based around expedition. But not expedition, but also it is expedition. It's weird. Like when you first start out, it doesn't have anything to do with expedition, and then like you end up going and talking to the guy who does the expedition, who basically finds out that like what you're messing with is also essentially the expedition, and you start going and looking for Calguran ruins. And it does seem like a really interesting mechanic. I've never really liked expedition as a mechanic, but the changes that they've made to it do look more interesting than what it was ever before. I'm willing to give it a shot at the very least. And yeah, there's like a whole map section specifically for the Calguran Ruin expeditions, where you basically go on a boat between islands, sort of similar to Act 4, and you search for like tombs and things like that. It's pretty neat. There's a whole quest for it. Like everything has a quest now. Like Expedition has a quest and Ritual has a quest, and you know, I think it's a good thing in general because it's going to help you like actually get used to the mechanics and get into the mechanic like originally, get your points, your initial starter points, which is really cool. Overall, I think just really good changes in general. Another thing that they clearly stated in the after interview was they stated that if you put 3 tablets of the same type in a zone, you will only get that type of league in the map. So, for instance, if you have a map and you put 3 Delirium tablets in the map, it will no longer spawn anything else other than Delirium. It will basically become a pure Delirium map. You can still put other things in there. They specifically stated that like Iridium maps or tablets will just be wild cards that will spawn anything. And there is, of course, you can still mix and match them. So like if you put Delirium and Breach together, you would get a Delirium Breach map. They kind of just added more control. You could put it like this: more control over what you get in the maps, which honestly I really really like because I didn't really appreciate like the sheer and utter randomness of like the crap that would be in the maps a lot of times, and you felt like you needed to build up all the points to get access to the bonuses for those things, and it just didn't really work out very well in my opinion. I like this idea better. You can still get randomized maps by not putting tablets in there or by using Iridium tablets. But if you put in specific tablets, like if you put in all Delirium or all Ritual, you're going to get all Delirium or all Ritual in that particular map, and that just sounds really cool to me. And then on top of that, there's also zones specifically dedicated to those types of maps. So like as you're going along, you'll find like an abyss section, and it's literally an abyss area. So you can do what you want with that, but it is an abyss area that you're going into, which is very apparent because there's giant, green fractures on the ground, and when you defeat the areas, the fractures close up, which is really cool too. I think visually, in general, when you look at the map on the end game for what it is currently, it's going to look so much different to you than anything you've seen before, because you're going to look around and you're going to be like, oh man, there's Abyss over there, and there's Ritual over there, and there's Delirium over there, and what the hell's that giant castle over there? And there's like, oh man, there's some sort of docks down there with a boat. And I think just visually in general, you're going to be drawn to specific things, unlike before where the map was pretty much just like this bland, everything is the same. Hey, look, there's water over there. That's about as interesting as it got before, which was silly. Now, the entire like first part of the map is handcrafted. I don't know if I specifically stated this. So handcrafted end game map. So before it was just completely randomized. The map was completely randomized, and you didn't really have any like specific thing going on. You might get citadels in the beginning, you might not. You might get, like a Viridian wood map in the beginning, or you might not. But basically what they stated is they didn't really like the fact, and I didn't really like the fact, that the end game was, like completely randomized. Well, so what they did was they kind of crafted a zone in the beginning. So like when you first get to the end game, you're in a kind of a handcrafted end game map, and then of course once you complete that, there is an infinite, just randomly generated one that is after that. But essentially, the map that you get into when you first start the end game is going to be the same for everybody. So if your friend's in and he's wondering where to go, you can be like, hey, go up to the top right and check out, there's a castle up there, or there's an abyss over here, and you can direct him really easily, tell him where to go, and help him out. And then of course eventually he's going to get to the infinite end game, and it's going to be randomized, but at the very least from the beginning there's going to be some structure to the end game, and you're going to know like what you're doing and when you're doing it, because it's going to be more obvious. You're going to look in the distance, you're going to see the objective, you go toward the objective, there's going to be a quest, you do the quest, when it's going to help you like finish what you're doing. It's, in general, it's just better all around. They did add two new ascendancies. Two new ascendancies. One, I'm not even gonna. I'm just gonna type in ascendancy. Two new ascendancies. They added one for the huntress, and they added one for the monk, which was the martial artist. The martial artist does look rather interesting, and the huntress one was the like spirit summoner or something. I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head. She basically like summons the spirits of the woods. The martial artist definitely seems really cool. There was a lot of interesting abilities, like this one here, which is hollow form, which basically is a channeling ability that allows you to summon like clones of yourself that just constantly attack the target. I saw it in action, and it does look really cool. Way of the Mountain, which helps with channeling abilities for, tankiness. There was also the Hollow Focus, which basically makes you spawn a bunch of ghostly bells all over the place, and when you hit them, they explode, which is really cool. There was also this one, which looked really crazy. Hollow Resonance, which basically makes it so that you attach a bell to your back, and then it just like rings every time you crit, which sounds nutty for crit builds. And then Way of the Stonefist seemed really cool for the martial artist. It basically turns your gloves into like a completely different piece of equipment, and any stat that's on the gloves gets converted to another stat, making some absolutely crazy glove like combos. They showed one that had like a bunch of lightning and fire damage on it, and when they put it on, it turned into like adds extra fire damage as like 29% or something, and like adds extra lightning damage as like 29%. Like it ended up being like a crazy item once they put it on. It'd be interesting to see what everything converts to with this ability. I'm not exactly sure. They didn't show everything on the martial artist, but they showed some of it. The other one is the huntress, and the huntress basically gets access to like the spirit animals and stuff, which is kind of nutty. I can't remember if it was her specifically, but there was also one that could literally tame bosses, which was nuts. Um, Trying to remember all of these. I can't remember. Oh, it's like the biggest freaking patch ever. It's ridiculous. That was a cool one. The Frost Flame Nova, which causes the ignited monsters to freeze. There's the Hollow Shell ability, which causes 100% of your runic ward to be granted to allies as guard, which is really neat. Um, I mean, in general, they added a lot of really interesting things, and this one right here is the next fire spell you cast yourself after using Warcry is ancestrally boosted, so you can ancestrally boost spells, which is nuts. Um, they also added this base amulet that you can craft on that has two passives on it, which is also kind of nuts. So basically, it just comes with two passives and it loses one of its prefixes. Um, They added so many unique items too. These are kind of crazy. These are jewels that you can get that just simply add more jewel sockets. There's a 2 jewel socket, a 3 jewel socket, and a 4 jewel socket one. The 4 jewel socket one is obviously going to be super expensive. You put the jewel in a jewel socket, consuming one of the jewel sockets, and then it gives you more jewel sockets. If you put the 4 jewel socket one in a jewel socket, essentially, you're using up 1 jewel socket and you're gaining 3 more jewel sockets. You gain 4 technically, but you have to subtract the one that you use up for the jewel, so it's 3 jewel sockets extra over the original, which is insane. Um, there's a whole bunch of new uniques too. They did show off a bunch of them. Like for instance, this one is a really interesting hammer that converts 100% of fire damage with mace skills to cold damage, which is kind of crazy. It also increases your damage based on your maximum mana. So you get added cold damage equal to 7 to 11% of your maximum mana, which is nuts. Overall, it seems like a really crazy two-handed mace. I was actually wondering like about this one in particular, like how the effects work, but they were showing it off with like fissures, and it just looked absolutely insane with fissures. Another one was this one with the ice crystals, the Midnight Zenith. I think they showed the Midnight Zenith, yeah. While active, critical hits with other skills that kill targets or hit powerful targets cause you to gain Arctic Petals. Once you have enough Arctic Petals, they can be consumed, and they create ice crystals near the most recent target, and then they actually explode and stuff. It looked kind of interesting. I'm not gonna lie. When they were showing it in the gameplay, it looked a lot cooler than it sounds. They also had the Raven's Flock, which seems to be designed around a minion build, has a huge amount of minion damage increase. It also makes your minions inflict grueling madness, and causes the spiraling conspiracy effect. The spiraling conspiracy is basically like a little hurricane of ravens that spins around you, and it scales up with every single monster that's within range, and eventually it gets to the point where it does massive amounts of damage. It looked like as long as you kept it running, as long as there was a monster within range, it would continue to keep stacking and stacking and stacking until eventually it would reach its maximum potential. But like, it looked really fun. It looked like an absolutely amazing little build that you could play with. There was also this one, the Horror Flight, which was built around culling, which was kind of nuts. It comes with this crushing fear ability that basically allows you to cull targets that are feared, and it looked like an absolutely insane clear build. The more things you feared, the more stacks you got. The more stacks you got, the better your culling was. And it definitely seems to be an item that you would put on a build specifically designed around culling. So if you stack this with, I'm assuming, your own culling buffs, you could probably get some absolutely crazy clear with this. Not sure exactly how it would function on bosses because you need stacks of Fear Incarnate to get the culling bonus, but it does seem interesting. Um, there was also the Sylvan's Effigy, which is essentially designed around companions. So it has a couple things. First off, it comes with the level 20 Asmeri Wolf, which I'm assuming is a companion. It also comes with the you can have any number of companions of different types. Now, I've played around with companions before, and there's a bunch of companions you can get. You can get the companions from the Huntress. The wolves count as companions. There's also a weapon where the talisman that counts as companions. You can potentially use this with the talisman too. So you could have the Asmeri wolf companion. You could have the regular wolf companions. You could have a huntress companion. You could probably have a couple huntress companions. You could also have the companion from I can't even count them all. You could easily have a bunch. They just have to be different types of companions for each individual one. Sounds like this would be an absolutely crazy one to set up with a full companion like druid wolf like build or something. It looks kind of nuts. The Asmerian Wolf also has his own special benefits, like he war cries and beefs up all your minions. He has like spirit wolves that he summons to attack. It's a pretty interesting item all in all. Definitely, it would be a really fun for a summon build. The Liminal Coil Twisted Wand. This one is insane. If you've ever played Diablo 2 and you've experienced the absolutely wonderfulness of the like Lightning Fury Amazon as she throws one bolt into a group and then the whole group ends up dying from the chaining lightning bolts that come out of that one Lightning Fury. This looks like that. I was watching them do it on the live stream and it just looked insane. Basically, how it works is you curse the targets, but you don't get any like effect of the curses. However, spells that hit a cursed target with the coiling bolts transfer to all other targets that are also cursed. And so when you start firing off coiling bolts at one target that's cursed, all the other targets that's cursed are also taking the same damage. And literally entire groups of monsters just fall down just like Lightning Fury on the Amazon. In fact, I'm actually calling it the Lightning Fury build because it literally just looks like the D2 Lightning Fury Amazon all over again. I'm not exactly sure how it scales up or how much damage it does versus bosses, but at least for clearing, it looks like it's absolutely insane. Moving on to the next item, we've got the Periphery Heartwood Shortbow. This one looks absolutely insane for a nice bow build. It has fire, lightning, and cold damage on it, and attack speed. And it also has this crazy thing. Elemental damage from hits contributes to flammability, ignite, and chill magnitudes, freeze buildup, and shock chance. So basically, any damage that's elemental applies to all of the ailments, which allows you to essentially stack all the ailments on the targets, which of course is crazy because on the passive tree there's tons of bonuses that have to do with ailments, and you would grab all of them, and you would get massive amounts of damage for applying ailments to the targets. It also comes with these Asmeri swarms, which would basically, when you kill a target, spawns these little Asmeri swarms, and they just kind of gang up on stuff and they murder things for you. It's kind of crazy. I saw like 5 of them in the video, and they were just like running at a target, and they'd all start beating the crap out of the target at the same time. And then combine the fact with you had basically all of the ailments at the same time. This looks like it's absolutely going to be insane build. Very fun to play. I don't know how it's going to do on bosses. I think that might be the one contention that I'd have to check because, it's not always easy to freeze bosses or to shock them or whatever, depending on how you're built. But I'm assuming with this particular build, you would want to build ailment chance as much as possible, so that would be a goal. It looks like a very, very, very fun item to play around with. This one right here, the Ordained Grand Spear, is literally just Diablo 3 Crusader Arbiter of Ash, or the Diablo 4 Crusader Arbiter of Ash. If you've ever used the ability, you jump up in the air, you get God, angel wings on your back, you fly up, and then you smash it in the ground, and you do like massive amounts of damage. It's literally Arbiter of Ash from Diablo 3. I think that's the skill, Arbiter of Ash. I could be wrong, but let me double check. D3 Arbiter of Ash. Arbiter of Ash Pinnacle. No, no, that's the Path of Exile. No, Diablo 3. Let me make sure I got the name right for the video here. Crusader skills. Let's look at the Crusader skills, and that way we can just pull it from the skill list. Debobolo 3. Holy shotgun, not holy shotgun. It was. No, it wasn't Fist of the Heavens. Heaven's Fury. Nope, not that one. Falling Sword. That's what it was called in D3. It was called Falling Sword. It's basically Falling Sword from Diablo 3. And in Diablo 4, they basically just changed the name and just like gave him angel wings, but it's literally the same thing. So this ability, the Righteous Descent, is legitimately just the Falling Sword ability from Diablo 3. If you've ever played that, it looks just as overpowered as the Diablo 3 version, and it looks just as overpowered as the Diablo 4 version. It's just the Crusader Falling Sword ability, and it looks crazy. I'm sure it's going to do massive amounts of damage, and if you want to build an entire character around it, it would probably be nuts. Um, not really my cup of tea, though, personally. We did get some information on the patch notes. So for those of you who are interested in the patch notes, they did specifically state that the patch notes would be coming on May 21st. Before the launch of the game. So the patch notes will be out on May 21st. They did also say that the launch of the game would be on May 29th, the following week after the patch notes. So we'll get full patch notes a week prior to the launch, so we can start like trying to figure out builds and stuff. They also said that we would get 1.0 PoE2 after ExileCon, which they said ExileCon was going to be on November 7th to 8th, which is pretty interesting too. I get so many other things here. What else am I missing? There's so much stuff to cover in this patch, and I just really don't know how to like go over all of it. I mean, this is the graphic that they showed, and as you can see, it says build planner features. Yeah, they say they added a build planner like inside the game where you could like load in somebody else's build, and I think it's like the dumbest thing ever, but I'm sure that people will use it. I really don't like holding people's hands to the point where you have a build guide that literally shows you everything that you need to do, but whatever. Over 30 new unique items, 400 new nodes in the Atlas tree. The Atlas tree looks crazy. Like I'm gonna be honest. 15 new bosses and pinnacles. Like they added a whole bunch of new bosses. There's basically a new boss for like almost every single endgame mechanic, like Delirium, Breach, so forth and so on. There's definitely a lot of fun stuff. The martial artist Spirit Walker, that's what it's called. The martial artist and the Spirit Walker. The Spirit Walker seems to be designed around basically summoning animals like a bear or like wolves and things like that that come and essentially like do attacks for you. I'm not exactly sure about that one, but it does seem interesting. I'm sure we'll get like full information on the ascendancies and more information so we can like plan out builds when the patch notes drop. The Masters of the Atlas. That was actually kind of a really interesting one. So the Masters of the Atlas are essentially like ascendancies for the Atlas tree. They're essentially three people that you have to find and do quests for. And once you find and do quests for them, you get access to specific bonuses that are going to change the way that the Atlas works. Like one of them increases the chances of unique strongholds by 100%. One of them has a 25% chance for your bosses to become like a super boss. Another one gives you like an additional bonus to your rarity. There's specific bonuses that you get, and most of them actually have negatives along with their positives. But there are three different options, and you can only choose one at any given time. Each one has four different choices, and on each choice, there's three different options, which makes for a lot of different potential combinations. I mean, you're talking about like what, 4 times 3 times 3. I don't know what that total number is. 4 times 3 times 3. So like 36 different possible combinations of like how you could potentially set up your Atlas ascendancy, which does seem interesting. Um, I mean, overall, like I think that the patch is going to be really well received. I do think that some people might be a little disappointed in the fact that there's no new class and there's no new weapons. But like I said in the beginning, I do feel like that the Calguran skills pretty much equivalent to a new weapon. And I think if you give them a chance, I think you'll probably agree. There's also a lot of new features that you can do. Like they introduced the ability to upgrade uniques. I believe it's specifically Calguran uniques, but I could be wrong about that. This allows you to take some of the lower level stuff and convert it into higher level stuff, so you can actually use it at endgame, which looks really cool. They also explain that some uniques would have unexpected effects upon upgrading. So, like normally when you upgrade an item, it just upgrades the item to a new tier. But some of them are actually going to have interesting effects that happen when you upgrade them, more so than just simply upgrading them a tier, which also looks really interesting. I'm actually kind of excited about that one because there's a lot of like lower tier uniques that I always thought would have been really cool as builds, but like just never really panned out because the damage was so low. Um, Man, I feel like some people are going to be disappointed in all the changes that they made to like attract new players, but I really don't feel like they should be. I feel like they should just be excited because then more new players will come play the game. Um, they did do a trade update. What was the trade update they did? Why am I forgetting it? Um, Man, I can't remember the trade update they did. They did a small update to the trade system. It did look good, but I can't remember it at all for some reason. Must not have had that much of an effect on me for if I can't remember it. Um, Man, I'm super excited to dive into this patch, but it's not for like 3 weeks. Actually, 2 weeks until we get the patch notes, and 3 weeks until we actually like get to dive into everything. It looks good. I'm excited. I'm very excited actually. I already have my eye on like 3 or 4 different builds that I'm potentially looking at, and I don't even have all the information of like the all the Calguran skills and like the Calguran uniques that I could potentially use. I'm excited to like actually dive into the end game and play around with some of the new mechanics. And the castle actually does look really interesting with all the unique maps in there and the stuff that you can do. One thing I will make a statement about is that like it definitely seems like they gonna be a lot of bosses this season. And it might be a good idea to pick a bossing build because I mean, not only can you fight like 6 bosses at the same time, but you can also go through the process of pulling bosses from one area into another, doubling them, tripling them, quadrupling them. Like, it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely crazy season specifically for bossing. And like, I mean, fighting 6 or 7 bosses at the same time sounds nuts already. But like, if you're a character that struggles with bosses, like if you traditionally pick a clear character over like a bossing character, it might you might struggle this season. I don't know because it feels like there's just like tons of boss mods. There was like a mod that made it so like your rare monster would just randomly spawn as a boss, and there was another one where like 3 of your rare monsters would randomly spawn as a boss, even though it was only like 5% chance. That means you could have a total of like 4 bosses in one run. The ritual ones can stack up to 7. Like there was another one where you could just have like 2 bosses spawn instead of one. Um, they really kind of like went ham with the bosses this season. It felt like um, all over the place. They gonna be a lot of bosses, and I think you should expect a lot of bosses. Um, mm, mm, mm. Yeah, I don't know. I like it. I like it a lot. I'm trying not to do like an hour and a half review of the PoE point 5 patch, but I like it. I think that if you bounced off the game originally because like it didn't really explain things very well or you didn't really know what was going on, might be a good patch to give it a try because it seems like they've done a lot of work to try and like remedy those issues. I think it's going to be a really fun season from the build perspective because it looks like they're adding a lot of new builds. You got to understand that if they added one new weapon, yes, there would be some new builds. but like the way that they're doing these skills, they kind of act as like skill multipliers, where basically they modify the existing skills. So we already have so many weapons in the game that these Calguran skills are most likely going to take those existing weapons and multiply the total number of builds that you can make. And I think it's going to be a crazy number of builds this season. Nobody's going to be playing the same character, but I think everybody's going to be having fun playing different characters, which should be crazy. A lot of cold stuff. I did also notice that. Let me mention that really quickly. A lot of cold effects, abilities, etc. were shown off. I mean, there was an item that converted everything to cold. There was a rune that converted all the elemental damage on a weapon to cold. There was like several cold abilities, like a ability that turned your ignite into a cold effect. There was, like just in general, it really seemed like they showed off a lot of cold effects this season, which I'm a big fan of, like freezing and cold effects. So perfectly fine with me. Um, absolutely adore cold and freezing and stuff in video games. Freezing arrows on the D2 is always one of my favorites. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching. Hopefully I summed things up a little bit better. If you're interested in checking out like the full video, I do have a live stream where we sat there and went over the entire thing, and you can, look at my full thoughts and see all the stuff that we went over and looked at. But this is just the, sum it up version. And as always, keep watching.